So, all of us want better results in our lives, right? Whether that is in our personal lives, whether that's with the teams we lead, whether it's in social change, whatever area we are involved in personally and professionally, we want better results there. But here's the thing, there is an invisible factor at work here that determines our results. And it's completely invisible to us. And equally, it's right under our nose. When I say that and when I explain what I'm talking about, I have never met a leader who said, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, so this is something every single person who has tried to achieve anything in their own life or within their organizations or teams, this is something you've bumped into. So I'm gonna speak a little bit about that. Like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I remember a conversation with my grandfather that went something like this. He said, what's the most crucial infrastructure that we need to develop for a country to succeed? And I said, energy? And he said, no, try again. Education? Close, but no. Okay, I give up. Tell me. And he says, the human infrastructure. If the human infrastructure is not developing in a healthy direction, everything else you do will be ineffective in the long run. This conversation was 5 years ago. And curiously, 5 years on from that conversation, I find myself specializing in the human dimension, in crisis response, in social change, in business, leadership, etc. Right? So the thing that highlights for me is how little attention we pay to that. Right? So if I were to ask you, what is preventing you, your company, or your community from succeeding or thriving, you will rarely say to me, we don't have information. Right? Lack of information is very, very rarely the cause for a company or an individual being unable to thrive. And yet, when we train people, we train them as though presentation skills and sales targets will be life-changing. So there's no shortage of information. Okay, we all know that. The gap is at the end where a human being is supposed to do something with that knowledge. Right? They're supposed to reflect or engage, implement consistently something, and they just don't do it. We all know things that we should do, but we haven't done. We yell at the girl at the checkout counter, even though we know it's not her fault that the machine isn't working. Right? We panic over something we really can't change. All of these very, very ordinary, common occurrences highlight the fallacy of a worldview where we think that the next expert, the next technique, or the next idea is going to save my company, solve all my problems. Information alone does not solve problems. All the things that solve problems are related to the potential built into the human mind. Creativity, perspective, motivation, foresight, resilience. So the biggest challenges we face in business, in society, and in our own lives are human ones, right? Apathy, cynicism, overwhelm, isolation, aggression. These are the challenges. And these are not mechanical challenges that exist out there in the world, they exist within people. And yet, in our quest for solutions, we have looked everywhere else, and we have barely passed a cursory glance at the one factor that drives all of this, the mind of a human being. So, while it seems like common sense that the mental clarity and perspective of a person affects how they show up in the world and what kind of results they produce in their lives or organizations or communities, this is a factor that goes most often completely unaddressed. And most of the senior leaders I work with have said they just hadn't realized that there was an understanding of the human mind that is easily teachable, that is relevant, and that is immediately impactful. And the other thing they often tell me is that once they did get some insight into the workings of their mind, right? Their own mind and that of every single other human being on this planet, they often say to me that understanding this, understanding the role of the human dimension at work in creating conflict or harmony, stress or creativity, failure or breakthroughs, they say that has given them and their teams a completely unfair advantage in the world of work. Why? Because the human being is the ultimate wild card in the system, and there is no greater leverage point than understanding and affecting this dimension directly. Nothing meaningful can be achieved without affecting the hearts and minds of the people involved. Systems and cultures, they're made up of the quality of thinking and the quality of interaction between people, right? So that is the only place where true, sustainable, and breakthrough change can happen. Now, I get it. It's unfamiliar territory for those of us in business or policy making. We're used to speaking of change in these very intellectual, complex, model-based way. But the bottom line is, mental clarity is step one in creating the results you want. It's the biggest game in town. So this very short recording is an invitation to you to look in that direction. Look away from the multivariable world of which program, which model, which idea, and look to the source of where true change is going to come from, which is you and all the other human beings who are involved in your team. Go there, see what you find. I promise you it will be transformative.